Hello, students. How are you all? I hope you all are doing good. So today we are going to start a topic which is of your grade 6, which is light, shadows and reflection. Okay. So before going into the topic, let's first introduce myself. My name is Aditya Jain. Yeah. Okay, that's enough. Okay. So we'll directly move with the topic that is light, shadows and reflection. Okay. So light, shadows and reflection, we are going to start. So for that, let's first see this diagram. What are you seeing or what are you observing? There is an electric bulb you can observe. So I think you have already observed this in your day-to-day life, that when you switch on this electric bulb, what you observe? You observe some light, yeah? And as soon as you switch off it, you will don't see any light like this. Okay. So this is the activity which you have all observed in your day-to-day life, that whenever you switch on a bulb, you can see the light, and when you switch it off, you can't see the light. Okay. So today what we are going to study in these topics, or what are the topics we are going to cover in this class, is introduction to light. First of all, we will see what is light. Then we'll see about types of object, which will be transparent, translucent and opaque objects. Then we'll move on to luminous objects. Then we'll further move to the discussion of shadows, what are shadows, and finally we will end the class on a topic which is characteristic of shadows. Okay, so I hope the outline of the class is clear to you all. Okay, so we'll move forward now. Okay, so what is light first of all? So if I give you example, suppose you are going from your school to your home, I say, in a bus. So in the meantime, while you are traveling from your school to your home, what you observe? You observe trees, you observe shops, you observe the roads. Yeah, you can observe animals also. So you can observe all these things while you are traveling from your whole school to your home. Okay. So why you are able to see this? Because there is something known as light which is present. Suppose you are going from the same school to the home in the night, when there is no road light present or any other kind of light is not present. So will you be able to observe these kinds of objects again? Your answer should be a big no. That we are not able to see these objects, trees, roads, animals, shops, which we are able to observe in the daytime. So what is the basic difference, or what is the thing is that in the daytime something known as light is present, which is enabling you to see the objects around you. But in the night time, when there was no road light or any other kind of light present, you were not able to see the same objects. The same example I can give is of the dark room. Suppose you enter in a dark room which has no light, so you will not be able to see any objects present in that room. But as you light a candle, or a torch, then you will be able to see the objects present in the room. Okay, so something is necessary to observe the objects nearby with us, which is known as light. So first of all, light is some brightness that comes from some light sources. As you can see in this diagram, there is a bulb. Around this bulb, you can see some brightness. So that brightness is defined as light. But if I talk about technical terms, in technical terms is that light is a form of energy. Light is a form of energy that enables us to see objects around us. So whatever objects are present around us, we are able to see them due to the light. Okay, clear? See objects around us. So this is the basic definition of light, that light is a form of energy that enables us to see objects around us. So what was happening in the daytime? There was a light present of sun. Okay, due to which we are able to see that objects like trees and animals. But in the night time, there was no light present, so we are not able to see the objects. So because of that, there can be two types of objects. Yeah, there can be two types of objects. Suppose observe these diagrams first. You can see these light sources. Suppose this is electric bulb. Yeah, this one is sun. This one is a wood log which is burning. This one is a lighter. This one is a lamp. And this one is a thing which is used in Indian festivals basically, which is known as a diya. So if you observe these all objects and these fireflies as well as this glowworm, what will you observe? You will observe that all these light sources have light of their own. Light of their own. Or you can say they produce light on their own. So those types of objects which have their own light or which produce light on their own are known as luminous objects. Are known as luminous objects. So what are luminous objects? That have light of their own. So these all are the example of luminous objects, whether you talk about sun, electric bulb, diya, electric lamp, lighter, woodlock in a fire, fireflies, glowworm. All these are example of luminous objects as they have light of their own. Okay, but there can be some objects also which don't have light on their own. Suppose if I was talking about trees which you were able to see when you were coming from school to your home. So that tree is not a luminous object. Why? Because that tree doesn't have its own light. So now why we are able to see the tree then? Because there is something known as luminous object, which is sun. So in the daytime, when any light ray or whenever any light comes from the sun to any object like trees, it gets reflected through them and then reaches our eyes. So that due to that reflected light or due to that reflection, we are able to see that objects. So there can be luminous objects, and the other thing are opposite objects are known as non-luminous objects. Non-luminous objects. So non-luminous objects are those objects which do not have their own light. So which do not have their own light. Suppose I talk about plastic chair, okay, or I can talk about animals, okay, I can talk about plastic bag or any kind of bag. These all things do not have light of their own. So then why we are able to see them? Because of the reflection, we are able to see them. Okay, so in this image you can see a mirror. What you can see? You can see a mirror. So mirror is what? Mirror is basically used to observe ourselves in the mirror. Yeah, every day when we wake up, we used to go in front of the mirror and see ourselves. So suppose if you are present in a dark room and there is a mirror present there, so will you be able to see yourself in the mirror? The answer is a big no. But yeah, in the daytime or whenever the light is switched on in the room, then you are able to see yourself in the mirror, because mirror is known as a non-luminous object. Mirror is something known as non-luminous object which doesn't have light of its own. But from outside, if light is coming on you, either from the sun in the daytime or from the light, then that light will get reflected, and due to that reflection, you will be able to observe yourself in the mirror. So mirror is an example of non-luminous object which doesn't have light of its own. So I think the basic difference is clear, that what are luminous objects, what are non-luminous objects. Okay, luminous objects have light of their own. Non-luminous objects doesn't have light of their own. So if I give you example of luminous objects, you can write sun, lamp, bulb, etc. And if we talk about non-luminous objects, then you can give the example of suppose mirror, yeah, and moon also. What is moon? Moon is a satellite of Earth. Moon is a natural satellite of Earth. So that is also example of non-luminous objects, because moon doesn't have its own light. Moon doesn't have its own light. Okay. So I think you are now clear about what are luminous objects, what are non-luminous objects, and what is a light. Okay. Correct? Okay. So we'll move forward now. So in this picture, what you are seeing a sun. So sun is a luminous object. Sun is a luminous object which has lights of its own. Okay. So whenever light comes from luminous object like sun, it gets incident on moon. So this is moon, which is a non-luminous object. This is a moon which is a non-luminous object. So whenever light comes from luminous objects and incident on non-luminous object sun, it gets reflected there. Yeah. So it gets reflected there, and that reflected light comes on the earth like this. So now in the night sky, you are able to see the moon. Yes or no? In the night sky, you are able to observe the moon. So that doesn't mean moon has its own light. So what is actually happening? What is actually happening? Sunlight is coming on the moon. It is getting reflected from the moon, and then from that reflection, it is reaching to the earth. So whatever you are able to see the moon is due to the reflection of sunlight. So that's why sun is a luminous object and moon is a non-luminous object, which is visible to us due to the reflection. So this thing is clear, and this basic thing is applicable to all the things we observe in day-to-day life. Suppose there is a pen. This is a pen. Yeah, light will come from a source. Suppose this is a source. Light will come from a source. It will get reflected from the pen and then reaches our eyes or the eyes of the observer. So whatever you are observing the pen is due to the reflection of the light. So this is very necessary that non-luminous objects should have been reflected, and then the reflected light reaches our eyes and we are able to see them clearly. Okay, so I hope this thing is clear, that how we are able to see the moon in the night sky due to the reflection. Done? Okay, so I hope everything is clear till now. Now we are going to move to the further topic, which is the type of objects, and we have basically dividing objects into three types, which is transparent, translucent, and opaque objects. Transparent, translucent, and opaque objects. So in the first picture, you are seeing a boy holding an object. So if you carefully observe this object, then you are able to clearly observe the boy's face from here. Yes or no? So that types of object which allows light to pass through them completely. Okay, so those objects which allows the light to pass through them completely are known as transparent objects. So from transparent objects, you will be easily able to identify the objects in the other side. In the case of this boy, this is the transparent object. Okay, now what are opaque objects? Opaque objects are those objects which do not allow light, to pass through them. Okay, so opaque objects are those objects which do not allow any amount of light to pass through them. Okay, so in this third picture, you can see this object is an opaque object, because now you are not able to see any part of the face of the boy, because whatever light is coming through it, it is not getting passed by this material, which is known as opaque material or opaque object. Okay, now this middle girl is holding an object which is known as translucent object. So translucent objects has properties between transparent and opaque, that it will neither completely block the light and neither completely allow the light to pass through it. Okay, so translucent objects are those objects which allow the light to pass through them partially. Partially means not completely, not zero. Okay, so those objects which allow the light to pass through them partially are known as translucent objects. So from translucent objects, you are able to observe objects. But the thing is that the image will be faint, not clear. The image, whatever you are observing, will be faint, not very clear. Yeah, but from transparent, you will observe clear image. Of the object, but from opaque object, no image. Okay. So I think the basic bifurcation of transparent, translucent, or opaque objects is clear, that transparent object will allow all the light to flow through them or pass through them completely, so that you will be able to observe the clear image of the object. Opaque objects are those objects which do not allow any part of light to pass through them. Okay, so you will not be able to observe the objects through the opaque objects. But yeah, translucent objects have properties between transparent and opaque. Yeah, so they will allow the light to pass through them partially. Okay, that's why you will be able to see the objects through them. Yeah, not completely, not clearly, but yeah, fainted objects you will see. Okay. So I think now that this basic bifurcation of transparent, translucent and opaque objects is also clear. Okay. Done. Okay. So we'll move forward now. The basic idea we are going to get in the next slide is the characteristics of light. Okay. So now in this slide, what you are observing, this first diagram, suppose observe this first diagram. There is a candle. Yeah, there is a candle and there is a person who is observing the candle from a straight pipe. From a straight pipe. Can you see this? So whatever light is coming from the candle is directly reaching the eyes of the observer or human being or the man which is standing here. So that's why person is able to see the light of the candle clearly. Okay. Now what is happening in the second case? Now the shape of the pipe has been changed. It is not a straight pipe basically. It is curved at the center. So what is happening? The same light is now coming from the candle. Okay. Now the person is not able to see the light of the candle. So what is the basic difference or what is the basic change we have done? We have just changed the shape of the pipe. Yes or no? We have just changed the shape of the pipe. So this is known as the property of light, which is known as rectilinear motion of light. Rectilinear motion, or you can say propagation of light. Rectilinear motion or propagation of light, which tells us that light travels in a straight line path. You can see from the diagram also, because in the first case the pipe was straight, so the light was easily able to reach the eyes of the man by following the straight path. But in the second case, the path of the light gets blocked due to this curved part. So light will travel like this. But yeah, now it is not getting any straight path to travel, and it can't travel like this. Light can't bend. Light can't bend. It can only travel in a straight line path. That's why the path of the light has been blocked in this case. So person is not able to see the light of the candle in the case of second. Okay. So this is the basic characteristic of light, which is very important in explaining various phenomena of light, which you can see in both the diagrams. So this phenomenon of light is known as somewhat called refraction. And this phenomenon is called reflection, which we are going to study later. But yeah, these two phenomena of light, one is refraction, other one is reflection. Both the phenomena can be explained on the basis of this characteristic of light, that light travels in a straight line path, or light performs a rectilinear motion. Okay, clear? So now we are going to move to the next concept, which is of shadows. Shadows. So what you are observing in this picture, there is a person who is somehow making some kind of structure from the hand itself. Okay, so when the light is incident on the hands of the person, you can see something dark. What will you observe? You will something dark behind the hands. So in whichever part the hand is there, the light gets blocked. Light gets blocked. So from the hands of the person, light gets blocked. Light gets blocked. So you will not be able to see that part. And the only thing remaining here is the darkness here. So behind the hand, what you are observing, some darkness. So whenever the light is getting blocked, you will observe a shadow. So shadow will always form whenever the path of the light is blocked. So who can easily block the path of the light? Opaque objects. Opaque objects. Because we have already studied, opaque objects are those objects which completely block the path of light, or which do not allow the light to pass through them. So whenever any opaque object is present and light source is there, so whenever light is falling on an opaque object, it gets blocked, and just behind that blocked portion, you will observe a dark. Yeah, you will observe a dark. So that darkness is known as shadow. Yeah, it will have a shape. It will have a shape same as the shape of the object. In this example, the object is a hand. So the shadow will have a shape like that of object, or you can say hand. Okay. So whenever shadow is formed, opaque object is required. Yeah. Another thing which is required is source of light. Another thing which is required is source of light. Okay. So now we will understand this phenomenon in a much better way by observing a video. So I'm showing you a video in the next slide. Let me just remove my microphone first. So there is a video.
Do you remember the concepts we studied in the previous lesson? First, we understood that opaque objects do not allow light to pass through them. Second, transparent objects allow light to pass through them and we can see through them clearly. And third, translucent objects allow light to pass through them partially.
So this thing we have already seen. That opaque objects are those objects which do not allow light to pass through them, and transparent objects are those which allow light to pass through them, and translucent objects are those which allow light to pass through them partially. So that is the basic bifurcation we have already seen. Clear? Now we'll move forward.
Now I want you to answer this question. What kind of an object is a human body?
Yeah. So the person is asking the question that what kind of object is a human body? Can you answer what kind of object is a human body?
Are we able?
Yeah. Or if I ask you a question that are we able to see through a human body? Are you able to see through a human body? I think your answer should be no. Yes or no? Answer should be no. So the human body should be an opaque object.
To see through it? Not really.
No.
Hence the human body is an opaque object. What?
So this is the thing he's again explaining, that you can't observe through a human body. You can't see through a human body. That's why human body is an example of opaque object. Okay.
When light is obstructed by the human body, we see that the human body is obstructing light here.
Now what you can see, there is a source of light on the top right corner, and light is coming from that source of light and it is getting incident on an opaque object, which is in this case a human body. So the portion which is obstructing the light, just behind that portion on the ground, you can see a dark, yes or no, dark area like this, which is similar to the human body. So that dark area is known as the shadow. Whatever dark area you are observing is known as shadow. Okay.
There is light in front of the human body, but what do you see behind it? Yes, a shadow. This thing you see behind the body is called a shadow. Now looking at this, can you tell me the things that are required for a shadow to be formed?
Now he is asking you what things are required for the shadow to be formed. So I have already told you some source of light is required, because if there is no source of light, no blocking of light will be there. Yeah. Second thing which is important is the opaque object, because that opaque object is necessary for the light to get blocked. Yes or no? Because opaque object has the property of blocking the light. This thing is clear. So suppose I am giving you one example before going forward into the video. Suppose you are playing with your friends, and suppose your friends go into an open playground. Okay. So suppose you are taking a torch with yourself. Yeah. So one person is standing and you just point the torch towards his face in the upward direction. Okay. You just point the torch towards the face of that friend in the upward direction. So will you observe any shadow of that face? Will you observe any shadow of that face? I think you shouldn't be able to observe that. So what is the reason? Although source of light is there, which is torch, opaque object is there, which is the face of your friend, but yeah, you are not able to see the shadow. Okay. Now again repeat the same experiment, that behind your friend take a cardboard sheet. Behind your friend take a cardboard sheet, and now incident the torch on the friend. Now you will be able to observe the shadow of that friend. So what is the basic difference in first case and the second case? The basic difference is the presence of screen. A word I am using is screen. Because in the first case, when you were incidenting light on the face, there was no screen present behind the person. But yeah, in the second case of cardboard sheet was present, which was acting as a screen. So third thing which is required for a shadow to be formed is known as screen. So what are the three things required? We have learned source of light, opaque object, and screen on which the shadow will be formed. So all the three things are required in every case for shadow to be formed. Getting my point? Okay, now let's move forward.
Two things are obvious. First, a source of light, which is in front of the body. And second, an opaque object. Here, the human body is the opaque object. Can you identify any other thing we may need for a shadow? Maybe not.
So he is asking for the third thing which is required for the shadow to be formed.
Now let's consider a different situation. In this situation too, we have a source of light as well as an opaque body. But do we see a shadow? No, we don't.
Now in this case, you are not able to see the shadow. Still the source of light is present, opaque object is present, but you are not able to see any shadow.
You know why? Perplexed? Well, had there been a screen behind the opaque object, you would have seen the shadow on it.
Yeah, that's what I was explaining, that there was a screen in the first case behind the person. So that's why you were able to see the shadow. But in the second case, there is no screen. So there is no observance, or you will not observe any shadow.
Because there is no screen or surface like in the previous case, we cannot see the shadow. What does this tell us? It tells us that we also need a surface on which a shadow can be formed.
So this is the surface which is required for the shadow to be formed, which is known as a screen. The screen can be anything. It can be a wall, it can be a building, it can be a cardboard sheet. Yeah, it can be a cloth, anything.
That surface will make us see the shadow. What's so special about shadows? Shadows also give us some information about the object. So
now we are now moving on to the characteristic of shadows, that what shadows will do. So first characteristic of shadows is that shadows gives us information about the object. That I already told you, that whatever will be the shape of the object, the same or nearby same shape will be observed in the shadow of that person also. Because if you take the example of human body, you were observing the shadow same as the shape of human body, like this. If you can see, the shape is same as the shape of the human body. So first characteristic about shadow, that shadow gives information about the shape of objects to us to a certain extent.
So if I show you this shadow, you will be able to tell me that it's a human body.
Now you are observing the shadow and you are clearly able to identify that this shadow can be of a human body by just observing its shape.
Shadow. But sometimes they can also be misleading. For instance, can you name the body?
Then now sometimes the shadow of shape of the shadow can also be misleading. Now see why it can be.
This is a shadow.
So can you name this, of which object this is the shadow? So basically, if I go by the shape, I'll say this is a shape of a dog. I can say dog face. Yes or no? We can identify that this is the shadow of a dog face. Now see.
It's that of a dog, but it's just our human hands playing the trick.
Now see, this was a human hand. As the light was incident on that human hand, whatever shadow you were observing was just observed to be a dog face, but it is not actually a dog face. So this can be misleading too. What I am trying to convey is that the shape of the shadow can be misleading sometimes. You were observing a dog face, or you were assuming a dog face, but it was not a dog face actually. It was the human hands playing the trick.
Has it ever occurred to you as to why shadows are formed?
Now question has been asked, why shadows are formed. So we have already studied the answer to that question, that shadows are formed due to two things. One thing is the opaque objects. If there is no opaque object, no shadows will be formed. Other point which is important is the straight line motion of light, which is known as rectilinear motion. Okay.
We know one of the reasons. Opaque bodies do not allow light to pass through them. Yes, that's one of the main reasons why shadows are formed. Another important reason for shadows to form is that light travels in a straight line. We will see its use in our next lesson.
Okay, so I hope this thing is clear. Okay, so now we'll coming back to study the properties, basically shadow. We have already seen about something shadow. So I think we have got the basic idea about shadow, that how shadows are formed. So three things are required for shadow. Three things are required for shadows. What are the three things? First one was the source of light. Yeah, first one was the source of light. What was the second one? Second one was the opaque object which will obstruct the light. Okay, and the third one is the screen on which the shadow will be observed. The screen can be anything, a cloth, cardboard sheet, building, wall, anything. Okay, but the basic necessities of a screen also. So all these three things are required for formation of shadows. Okay. Now we are talking about characteristics of shadows. Characteristics of shadows. So we have already seen one characteristic of shadow, that shadow will give you some idea about the shape of the object. Some idea about shape of the object. Yeah, but this can't be correct. This can't be correct every time, as we have seen in the case of human hand, misleading you to a dog face. Remember in the video? Okay. So this will give you some idea about the shape of the object. So what is the other thing? The shape of the shadow, or the second characteristic is the size of the shadow. Size of the shadow. There can be two cases. Suppose if I give you example, you are standing in a dark room. You are placing a torch in front of your face at some distance like this. So we'll observe shadow of bigger size of your face on the wall. But yeah, as you try to move the torch away from the face, then the shadow of your face will get smaller. Then the shadow of your face will get smaller. So what is the basic conclusion? That if the distance between source of light, that is torch, and object is less, size of shadow will be large. If the distance between source of light and the object is large, then the size of shadow will be small. So that is the characteristic of shadow. We are concerning about size of shadow, that if the distance between source of light and object is large, shadow will be smaller. And what is the reverse case? If the distance between source and object is small, shadow will be larger. Okay. So these are the two properties we have already seen. What is the third property? Third property is concerned with some angle of incidence. Third property is concerned with angle of incidence. Okay. So if the angle of incidence of source of light with the object is small, and there can be a case when angle of incidence is large. So whenever the angle of incidence is small, the size of shadow will be larger. And when the angle of incidence is large, size of shadow will be small. So these are the basic characteristics of shadows. Shadows gives us some idea about the shape of the object, but yeah, this can be misleading sometimes. Second thing is that if the distance between source of light and object is large, the size of shadow will be small. And if the distance between source and object is small, shadow will be larger in size. The third characteristic of shadow are concerned with the angle of incidence, that if the angle of incidence is small, size of shadow will be larger. And if the angle of incidence is larger, then the size of shadow will be small. Okay. So these are the basic characteristics of a shadow. So I hope everything till now is clear. Okay. So now we'll move forward. So we'll move to the next topic, which is shadow in case of transparent, translucent and opaque objects. So if you can see in the diagram, in the first case, there is some objects. So the most prominent shadow, or you can say dark shadow, will be observed in the case of opaque object, because it will completely block the light. Yeah, that was our main concern in observing the shadow, that the object should be opaque so that it will be easily able to block the light. Okay. Now see the translucent object. It will not be able to completely block the light. Yeah, but it can block some part of light. So whatever part of light it is blocking, due to that we will observe a shadow which is light. Not a dark shadow, but yeah, kind of shadow which is known as light shadow. Okay. But yeah, in the case of transparent object, it is not blocking any part of light. Okay. It is not blocking the light at all. So that's why there is no shadow observed in the case of transparent object. Okay. So the most prominent shadow will be observed in case of opaque object. You can observe some light shadow in the case of translucent object because it will block some part of light due to its property. But yeah, in the case of transparent object, no light is blocked. So you will observe no shadow in that case, because for formation of shadow, blocking of light is the necessary condition. Done? Okay. So now this is a diagram. You can see shadows made by sun at different times during the day. Okay. So when you see in the morning and the evening, if you carefully observe in the morning, evening, the size of the shadow is larger. In the morning and evening, the size of the shadow is larger. But yeah, in the noon time, the size is relatively small. So what is the reason? I have already given you the reason in the third characteristic of shadow. In the third characteristic of shadow, that if the angle of incidence is small, shadow will be larger. If the angle of incidence is large, shadow will be small. So during morning and evening, light will be coming like this on the man. This man is the opaque object. This is the opaque object. This is the source of light. Okay. So this is the source of light. This is the opaque object. So you can see the angle is like this incidence. This is the angle of incidence. So angle of incidence is relatively small. So shadow is larger. But yeah, during the noon time, shadow is coming from a lesser height or lesser altitude. So that's why the angle of incidence is larger. And you can see a smaller size of shadow during the daytime or in the noon time. So this is the reason why the shadows are larger in size during morning and evening time, as the angle of incidence is small. But yeah, they are shorter or relatively small during the noon time because the angle of incidence is large. Okay. So I think this is clear. So what we have covered in the today's topic, we have covered topics which is introduction to light. We have seen different properties or the basic definition of light. Okay. Then we have seen the type of objects which can be luminous, which can be non-luminous. Okay. So luminous objects are those objects which have light of their own or which produce their own light. Okay. And non-luminous objects are those objects which do not produce their own light. Okay. So example of luminous objects can be sun, can be bulb. Yeah. We have seen different objects, some flies also. So what is the example of non-luminous objects then? Sun, oh no, sorry, moon. Yeah, moon can be a non-luminous object. And we have already seen that why you are able to see the objects due to the reflection. Whenever light falls on an object, it gets reflected, and due to that reflection, you will be able to see the objects. So light is a form of energy that allows us to enable the objects or see the objects clearly. Then we have seen luminous, non-luminous objects. Then we have covered the type of objects which are known as transparent, translucent, and opaque objects. We have seen the characteristics of light through them. Okay. Then we have seen that light travels in a straight path, and due to that straight path, one phenomena is observed which is known as shadow. So for shadow, three things are required. Yeah. One is source of light, another is opaque object, and third one is screen. Then we've seen why shadows are relatively larger in morning, evening, why they are shorter at noon. Okay. And then we have also studied some characteristics of shadows also. Okay. So I think all these concepts are clear. Okay. So this was about today's lecture. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. So thank you so much. Have a nice day. Bye.